What new season of life are you entering? How will you need to change? What relationship will you have with God? In the 1980s, anthropologist Dana Raphael coined the term matrescence. It sounds a lot like adolescence, and it is also a developmental stage. It refers to the process of becoming a mother, and I'm looking at so many of my favorite mothers in this congregation, and I've been thinking about you as I was writing this sermon. Becoming a mother changes every aspect of a woman's life. Whether one adopts or gives birth, it is a physical, hormonal, psychological, social, political, and spiritual change. And yet, because we did not have a name for it, many of us were so focused on the caring for a new child or bouncing back to our career that we did not realize the vast changes that accompany motherhood. After having our children, we are not supposed to just get back to our old bodies or our old lives. We cannot return to the way things were. We are changed, and the process of being changed is uncomfortable. I wonder what new stage of life Peter and Andrew, James and John were entering when they first encountered Jesus on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. After the arrest of John the Baptist, Jesus retreats away from the political tensions and violence of Judea. He leaves home in Nazareth and he settles, the word is actually to make house, kataoikos, in Capernaum, which Isaiah calls the Galilee of the Gentiles. Now Matthew quotes a passage from Isaiah, and the passage from Isaiah is the one that's appropriate at the coronation of a king. It comes from the 8th century BCE, a conflict that might make you think of Ukraine today, where Israel successfully defended itself against the northern Assyrian military armies as they came across the border. And so this coronation anthem announces a new realm of peace, freedom, and justice. The poet proclaims, "The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined." So when Matthew quotes these words, they're already several hundreds of years old, and he does it to show that Jesus also is inaugurating a new era. Jesus tells people who he encounters to repent. The word is metanoia. It means to literally change the deepest patterns of our minds. And we need to do this in order to experience the full magnitude of what God is offering to give us. The Greek word basileia is the word that means kingdom, realm, rule, reign, empire. And Jesus baldly compares the brutality and greed of the Roman basileia with a new heavenly basileia, the kingdom of God, in which all people will be liberated from oppression. Now, for 30 years, I've studied this passage, and if you look at the front cover of your bulletin, you'll get the same impression that I had for 30 years. And this is the first time this week in reading it that I realized something was different about the reading that I'd never noticed before. The Greek word means that Peter and Andrew were very different in their mode of life than James and John. Peter and Andrew were wading in the shallow waters with a net that you'd throw to catch small amounts of fish. So they were poor, very poor. And this wasn't the kind of job that you could do all year round. It was kind of a part-time job. They probably put other part-time gigs together just to be able to make it by. James and John, however, come from a higher social class. They're the ones who are in the picture in your bulletin. They are sitting in a boat, which is kind of their family business with their father. They own this boat, and so they can drag the net across the lake, and they catch much larger catches of fish. Both sets of brothers, though, would have depended on a kind of license. They had to buy the right to fish in the Sea of Galilee, and the Roman government would take a substantial tax from them. They both were two pairs of brothers who are fully aware of the power of the Roman armies. And this might have given us a hint of their state of mind when Jesus says simply, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." My friend Matt Bolton points out that there are two ways of reading this. The first is that we just take it at face value. Jesus simply says two words, and they drop everything and follow him miraculously. Or second, he suggests that perhaps the brothers are already feeling a kind of dissatisfaction with their lives. Perhaps they already are dreaming of something better. The Greek word to leave that's in this passage is aphiemi, and it means also to be freed from debt, from slavery, from sin. It is forgiveness and release. It is a jubilee word. Now, becoming a parent for myself freed me from illusions that I had carried from my own childhood. It opened up a deeper experience of love. It taught me about cooperating, and that ultimately, in the very difficult things, we can depend on God's grace. So Jesus does not tell these fishermen to believe something or to join a political party or to defend a constitution. He just says, follow me. Walking alongside Jesus has been one of the greatest blessings of my life, especially in moments of change. And this morning, I want to say and remind us all simply to follow him. When Heidi and I fell in love, we didn't really understand each other. We were from such different worlds. And we realize in retrospect that falling in love is what happens first, and understanding the person is what happens next. So you don't need to know and understand Jesus perfectly. We come to understand the person that we love through loving them. For this reason, the preacher Frederick Buechner writes, faith is the word that describes the direction our feet start moving when we find that we are loved. Faith is stepping out into the unknown with nothing to guide us but a hand just beyond our grasp. Elsewhere, Buechner writes about the sense of Jesus directing us in our lives, almost a sense of Jesus' physical presence as a hand on our shoulder, as a voice in our heart. And it's been the case for me as I try to listen to Jesus. Today on the forum, I talked to Dr. Keltner. He's a psychologist from UC Berkeley about his book, Awe. And after studying the expressions of awe in 26 different cultures, Keltner believes it's a fundamental part of being human, of experiencing meaning. He describes awe as an encounter with the vast mystery beyond our understanding. It is when we become free of our ego in the face of something that's far greater than us. And it is the primary source of our happiness. I think awe is what led Peter and Andrew, James and John to follow Jesus. And I think it's what leads a lot of us to follow Jesus. Now, wonder is not exactly the same thing as awe. Wonder is almost like awe is what happens in the moment. Wonder is kind of our response to thinking, how did that happen? But the scientist Rachel Carson, the woman who wrote Silent Spring, has this wonderful little book about wonder. And in it she writes this: if I had influence with the good fairy who is supposed to preside over the christening of all children, I should ask that her gift to each child in the world be a sense of wonder so indestructible that it would last throughout life as an unfailing antidote against the boredom and disenchantments of later years, the sterile preoccupation with things that are artificial, the alienation from the sources of our strength. Now, when she wrote that, I think that somebody in the Episcopal Church must have read it, because in our baptismal service, in the prayer that we say after baptizing babies, we ask that our children, we ask for them the gift of joy and wonder in all God's works. It's one of my favorite prayers in the prayer book. For me, awe is the experience of that intuition that we are loved by God. Now, although we are surrounded by awe-provoking possibilities in the smallest and grandest experiences, sometimes we do feel alienated from the sources of our strength. Sometimes our fear or suffering, it makes us blind to joy and wonder. And in moments like this, we need each other to remind us of what we once knew. In her autobiography, my one of my favorite teachers of all time, Margaret Miles, quotes St. Augustine's prayer to God. So this is what he says: "O God, you will bear us up. Yes, from our infancy until our hair is gray, you will bear us up. Let us return to you, Lord, so that we may not be overturned. For you yourself are our good, and we need not be afraid of having no place to which we may return." Augustine repeats, return. Return to the source of life. Jesus himself calls you to come back. Return to your heart. I want to conclude with a poem and a blessing, and then with a short experience that I want to share with you. This is the blessing. It comes from the poet John O'Donohue, and it was a gift that Ellen Clark King gave to me in our second Christmas together. "In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you are ready to emerge. For a long time it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, when your courage kindled, and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awake your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. Now, although I looked really cool on the outside, on the day that Heidi gave birth to our first child, I was terrified that she was not going to make it. She'd had her first labor pains 3 days before, and she'd been in excruciating pain for 40 hours, 70 hours, I don't even know how many. And at this point, she was shivering and shaking with fear and cold in the operating room with a massive incision across her abdomen. But when we took that little baby and we laid it by her chest, I looked in her eyes and I could see that she had become a mother. She had become something stronger and newer than anything I'd ever seen. And I knew her in a new way. We have walked in darkness and seen a great light. The deepest patterns of our minds are being transformed by Jesus and his nearby realm of heaven. What new season of life are you entering? How will you need to change? What is coming to birth in you?